So welcome everyone to our webinar. I'm going to hand over now to Victoria Lambert and Jill Foster, who are two freelance journalists, and they're going to talk you through the media maze. So I'm going to now mute myself and let you go, and I'll come on at the end to answer any questions. So by the way, if any of you have any questions you'd like to put to Jill or Victoria, do ask them in chat throughout, and we'll get to them at the end on a first come first served basis. So thank you very much.
Excellent. All right, thank you, Hannah. Right, well, I'm going to take over, and Jill and I are going to sort of share this between ourselves. I'm looking at the corner, but I should be looking at you. We're going to share this between ourselves, and hopefully you'll get lots out of it. I'll start by introducing myself. I'm Victoria Lambert. I am a journalist. I've been working for more than 30 years. Don't like to say that too loud. Daily Telegraph, Daily Mail, Guardian. I've written for Woman and Home, Good Housekeeping, Saga. So all kinds of media. I've written a book called Boundaries, which is how to draw the line in your head, heart and home. And I'm an expert trainer with Feature Me UK media courses. So that's me, and this is Jill.
Hello everyone, my name is Jill Foster, and I'm also a freelance feature writer, but I've only been going 20 years, so so I'm not as experienced as Vic. But yeah, I write mainly for the tabloid press, the Daily Mail, the Daily Mirror, the Sun, but I also do some work for Closer magazine, Woman magazine, Bella, those kind of mid-market magazines as well. So that's me. And I've also written a few books years ago now, but it was with a lady called Jane Tomlinson. Some of you might know her. She was the lady who ran lots of marathons, did Ironman competitions, triathlons, and she had incurable cancer, sadly died in 2007, but I wrote 3 books with her and her family. I'm also an expert trainer with Feature Me as well.
So moving on, we've got what do journalists want anyway? So the crucial thing is, why do we come to you? You know, why don't we just fill our paper with advertisements and long columns written by Boris Johnson? Well, because obviously that would be very dull. We need your stories to tell, and we need interesting stories, good stories, bad stories, funny stories, sad stories. We need stories about business. We need stories about travel. We need stories about pets. A good newspaper is a fantastic thing to read because it's full of variety, and hopefully it appeals to lots and lots and lots of you. And for us, it's like filling the steam engine on a train. You know, every day it requires an enormous amount of stories to fill. So if you imagine one newspaper requiring masses of work from 50 or 60 journalists, and you replicate that across all the media in the UK, you know, all the newspapers, the radio stations, TV broadcasts, all the internet, and then you replicate that again across the world. You're talking about an enormous amount of media that we have to create every day. And whilst news stories are pretty much the same, you know, we're all going to tell the same news story, although usually in different ways. After that, we have to attract our readers and retain them with giving them variety. And we have to get stories first, and we have to get stories that no one else has even thought of telling. So, you know, if you look at it like that, it feels quite daunting. But we do have tried and trusted methods of finding these stories. And what is certainly true, and what you will know through PRs and other people, is that these stories can then benefit you. We don't just win as newspapers taking stories and putting them in the paper. And the reader doesn't just win having something to read. The person who places that story, if they do it well, also benefits. And that is the basis of what this whole Meet the Media session is about. How can you learn to make the most of those opportunities?
So we have lots of ways of finding stories. Now, traditionally, years and years ago, it would be about having your own patch. It would be about going out, knocking on doors, talking to shopkeepers, listening into conversations in the pub. That seems to have died out now, which is very sad, because we need to speak to more local people and we need to get stories. And to a certain extent, local press still do, but we're moving so quickly now with social media that there are various other ways to get stories and to get them much quicker. So one of the ways we do is via a PR agency, and PR agencies are always trying to place stories with us, but you need to be wary that journalists are quite sceptical about things they get from PR agencies. You know, we're not here as journalists to sell your product or service. We're here to get under the story and find out what's going on. And really, we're more interested in the human interest side of any press release. We're not really interested in business unless there is a human angle or something more interesting than a new website or a new product. We also get ideas from local newspapers. You'll find that sometimes things will have been in the local press weeks before they suddenly arrive in the national press. And we also get stories through friends. You'll be amazed how many times I go out for drinks with my friends and they're talking about something, but then I'll think, well, hang on, if they're talking about this, and I've heard other friends talking about this, then obviously other people are talking about it. So that you can get stories that way. And of course, social media. I get loads of my stories from places like Twitter. I can think of one brilliant example a few months ago where I saw a local football team called Sands United, who were made up of men who'd all experienced some kind of miscarriage or stillbirth. Their wives had suffered and everybody was crowding around the wife, but it was the men who were struggling to talk. So they formed this wonderful football team and they were tweeting. And I just came across this tweet and thought, well, that's an amazing story. And we did a brilliant feature for them in the spread, and it got picked up everywhere on television and magazines. So that's a really good place to start. LinkedIn, again, it's a bit corporate. I'm not keen on finding stories there, but it is possible. And Facebook, you know, the sort of thing that keeps going viral, things to do with children, things to do with health, things to do with consumer issues. You know, I've missed my flight, I'm stuck in Mallorca because blah, blah, blah hasn't done so. All those things seem to go viral. So that's where we tend to pick up our stories at the moment.
I'll add on to LinkedIn. I actually do like LinkedIn. So I'm glad Jill doesn't, because it gives me more room to find stories there. So LinkedIn, I found a great one on LinkedIn. A guy was posting about a book he'd written, and he had self-published it. And I don't know how it came onto my feed. I think we must have had someone in common who'd liked it and it appeared. And it was a great story. It was a guy who'd knitted his way out of depression. And again, as soon as I saw that, I thought, oh, yeah, this is a story. And it was lovely. So I contacted him. We did a great story straight away. And subsequently, he's done loads of press because he's very active, he's very engaged, and he sort of calls me and says, do you think I should do this? And I'm like, yeah, go for that. But it was a really interesting thing because he was like, well, I don't know why I'm putting this on LinkedIn, but I'm just going to chuck it out and see what happens. And actually being brave is half the battle. It's just saying, yeah, why don't you try every avenue? You want to be successful, you're really going to have to work at what you do. So going on, how can you get involved? And this is why you're here today. This is why you're listening to the webinar. As Jill said, you can go via a PR agency. And some of you maybe do PR yourselves. You may do, have your own PR businesses or marketing businesses. So that's not a world that's unfamiliar to everyone. And it's a perfectly reasonable way to go about it. You will pay a retainer, probably a monthly retainer, depending on the size of firm, or you may pay on results. And either way is pretty respectable. You will get the support of an agency, you will get someone writing your material for you, organising it and sending it out. So you won't get that for free because you are obviously paying for their time and their office and their expertise. So bear in mind, if you do it yourself, that's what you're replicating. But you can do it yourself. And we find more and more in this world that people are such self-starters. You have to be a self-starter in this world. And they like to do it. I find a lot of people really like to have a crack at it themselves. I know some people who have a PR agency and also do it themselves because it can be fun and it's a skill that you can learn like any other. So there are lots of ways in getting in touch with journalists, and we are open to it. We don't sit back, as Jill said, we don't sit back and wait for PRs to get in touch with us. That would be very lazy, and we wouldn't produce good stuff.
So if you are going to do it all yourself, then there are certain things that you need to have in place before you contact us. I'll give you a really good example of somebody who contacted a journalist recently. This is a man called Scott Dixon, who had written a book about consumer issues. In fact, do I have the book somewhere here? No, I don't. But Scott had written a book about things like how to get off a parking ticket and consumer issues, how to complain. And he just emailed me out of the blue one day. It was back in May. Wrote a very polite email and told me about his book. And it was just the way he approached it, not expecting anything, but just very polite, and told me very succinctly about what the book contained and what he'd be up for doing. And it sparked an idea in my head about, could you become a consumer champion just off your own back, or do you have to have some special knowledge? He got no qualifications in this kind of area, but he just learned it himself and written this book. Anyway, it turned out that I did some investigation, and other people like Helen Dewdney, I don't know if you've heard of her, who's also called the Complaining Cow on Facebook, and she's checking out. And Scott had nicknamed his Facebook the Grumpy Git, so I thought, hey, we need to get these two together. And I found 3 other consumer champions, and it ended up as a brilliant spread again. Again, that ended up in the Mail, in Woman magazine as well, but that all came from that one single email to me about 6 months ago. And his book has sold all over the world now. So the things you will need when you're contacting a journalist are a press release. And I prefer to always get press releases as cut and paste in an email. I don't like attachments. I don't know many journalists who do, because they just clog up your inbox. So try and do press releases as cut and paste, or just a simple letter like you would be telling a friend. Keep it quite informal. We can spot a generic press release a mile off. So try and make it personal if you can. Say to me, hi Jill, how are you? Loved your feature in blah the other day, really enjoyed it. I wonder if I could just show you this. Make it personal. I can't emphasize that enough, because too many press releases sometimes start off either Dear Joe, I get that a lot, journalist, which is sometimes Dear XXXX, where they've just forgotten to put a name. So immediately that's delete. So I would suggest making it personal, and then have a press release. And in that press release, you need to tell me who you are and what you're doing. So don't forget things like your name, the product, what, where, who, when. Things like dates are important, and specifically why you're doing this. We'll come on to that later. I've covered biography there, so that's 2. With biography, also be prepared to tell me a little bit about the people around you, things like husband, children, where you live. You don't have to give me your specific road, but it's always nice to have some idea of where in the country you are, whether that's a town, village, or county. It's a bit split about high-res photographs. I personally don't like to be sent a high-res photograph because, again, I'm freelance. I don't have a big team of IT people who can unclog my computer. But if you're sending something to a staff newspaper or a magazine, by all means send a high-res. If you're sending to a freelance, I suggest you send just one single low-res image that is illustrative of your story. And if they ask for more, and say that more pictures are available and they're high-res. It's also good to mention to journalists about any other media that have been attracted by your story, because there's nothing that will engage a journalist more than thinking, hang on, somebody else is onto that story. So I would suggest that if you've been picked up by local radio or local press, then tell us that. I know that when Scott contacted me, he mentioned that his book had been mentioned, I think it was in the local press, but he was also going to be interviewed by Radio Scotland about it. So immediately I was interested, thinking, well, if other journalists want to know about this book, then it's clearly of interest. Facts and figures are really important as well. Journalists love a good stat. And even if you don't have any solid data, like any empirical evidence, as a business, you will have anecdotal evidence anyway. So you can say things like, 60% of my customers love X, but only 20% or 40% love this. So you've got those statistics, and journalists will pick up on that. So that's really good. And obviously quotes and sound bites. If you can make them as engaging as possible, that's always good. Bring out examples, like I've just done with Scott. I could easily just tell you about Mr. X up in Scotland. But if you tell a journalist about something that's happened to you personally, in your business or in your shop, then that really engages them as well. So I'd recommend doing that. Over to you.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. Whoops, I've gone too far. I have to go back. Hold on. Getting ready. So before you engage with the media, we like you to prepare a little bit. And one of the most important things is, where do you want to be seen? I mean, to give Jill's example recently, the consumer guy, he decided he went for local radio, which is really sensible, because local radio don't have the resources that national news do, so they're really happy with stories coming to them. But if you think the Daily Mail is absolutely where your product needs to be, and you've seen some of the stuff like that in the Mail, then that's where you need to target. Some people, I think venues often need to target locally much more, so they should go for local magazines, local newspapers, local TV. Don't immediately assume that you want to be in the Times, because the Times may not work for you. I dealt with a personal trainer a few years ago at the Telegraph, and she had a series of amazing coverage. I mean, full pages of her looking fabulous doing exercises. And I said to her a few years later, what was the result of that? And she said, I don't think I got a single client. She said, that's not where my clients come from. People love it, and they love to say that my trainer is in the Telegraph. Those are the clients she already had. She wanted new clients. New clients she got much more effectively through social media. Then you need to decide what you can and can't talk about. And the best example of this at the moment is Brexit. Because if you do a business interview, it's extremely likely you will be asked, how would Brexit, no deal, deal, whatever, impact on your business? You need to know what you can and can't talk about and what you want to talk about. Don't get drawn into something that you don't want to talk about. Don't get drawn into arguments that lead nowhere. Really focus on what you're comfortable talking about, because you'll do your best job then as well. You won't lose publicity. You won't turn other people off. People aren't going to go, I don't want to use them because they think X or they think Y. It'll make you more confident in your message. Then you have to ask yourself, are you the best spokesperson for your business? You might run the company, you might have set it up, you might know the company inside out, but you might have someone else on your staff who's just a brilliant communicator. They're the charismatic one that has everyone engaged at parties, and you're thinking, you know what, they're the one who's going to be able to relate to journalists really, really well. And so you may have to take a step back yourself and push them forward. Is your online presence up to date and super tidy? I mean, we all tell our children to do this before they join in with, apply for jobs and the like. Do we do it ourselves? What does our Facebook look like? Could somebody go onto your Instagram and see something you'd really rather they didn't? Really, you need to be very thorough. Lastly, do you want to highlight any special offers? Special offers are great. People love them, even if it's 5% off, 10% off, a free this, a free that. Have a think about what you could do, because it just gives your whatever you're doing a little bit of extra pizzazz. So I'm going to go on then to a case history. And this is Shahrazad Umbreen, who is a fantastic lady from Birmingham. She set up a business called 18-Hour Heels. She did this while she was also working for the Co-op. She's an incredibly busy woman. And she wanted to make shoes that you could wear, from the morning all the way through to the evening. And she designed them, and we were in touch. And she got a full page of editorial in the Daily Mail. And it was phenomenal. She sold out of shoes in one day. She received orders from 9 countries, including the US. 7,500 visitors to the website. 500,000 on Twitter. Nearly 750,000 on Facebook. It went on and on and on. She has now written a book. She's been to Downing Street to join a British trade delegation. She gets flown to Dubai to sell her shoes. She's launching them in all kinds of new colorways, and it all came from one article. It was extraordinary. She just engaged it. She was totally up for everything. She took her shoes out and she said, "Look, it's a great concept. The one idea I have about this is a pair of shoes I could wear all day long." And that's all you need. It's so simple. Is that one great idea, and then the welly to follow up all the time. And look what she's done. She's recorded her stats. So every time she went on to the next question, she'd say, "My shoes, 500,000 people have been interested in them on Twitter." It's crazy. Everybody loves it because you've all got something to write about. You could write about them from fashion. You can write about them from a business point of view. She has a great charity angle to it, so that a percentage always goes to supporting children in Pakistan, girls in Pakistan getting an education. She's a very genuine person. That comes across too. So she's a fantastic case history, but this could be anybody because it's not, she hasn't reinvented the wheel here. And best of all, she didn't pay for any advertising. She just responded to a request from a journalist looking for a fashion with a twist. She was interviewed, and the rest was, as we like to say, retelling history. So, Jill.
Okay, so where do you find the opportunities to put your story out there? Now, the traditional way of doing this would be a PR mail shot, whether it used to be by post, now it's by email. And as I was saying earlier, journalists can spot a generic PR mail shot a mile off, and they do tend to go in the bin. I think the average lifespan of a press release, and there are going to be PRs crying all over the place, is about 7 seconds. And if it doesn't grab us in those first 7 seconds, I'm afraid it will just go into the archive or into the delete bin. So it really does have to be targeted, and that is playing a much longer game. I don't believe any press agency that says, I will send it out to the 400 of the top journalists who are writing about this subject, because those 400 journalists, out of all of them, 396 of them will put it in the bin because they know that this PR agency does that for everybody. So why should your business and product be any different? It's much better to take a personal approach, and you've never been in a better position with the advent of things like Twitter and social media to be able to do that and contact journalists that you think would be interested in your story. So obviously Twitter is the main place to be, and you really, as any business owner, you need to be on there, and you need to be reading the stories that interest you and that are relevant to your business. And perhaps create a list in Twitter of journalists that you admire. Don't call it something like useful journalist, because that journalist will be alerted to the fact that you're just useful. Call them something like, brilliant journalist or admired journalist or fascinating or something like that. Don't call them useful, because that's happened to me sometimes and I think, hang on. So follow them and engage with them. I think it's really important to engage with people whose work you admire, because it's so nice to get a reader to say, loved your feature today, it happened to me, or it happened to my mum, or whatever. And to know that people are actually getting something back from the features you're writing is why we do the job in the first place. A really good hashtag to check out on Twitter is journo request, because although there are lots of very expensive services that you can sign up to get journalist request, Twitter's free. And sometimes if we send off a journalist request to one of these expensive agencies, it can take several hours before it reaches people's inboxes, whereas Twitter is immediate. You only need to go through the top or the latest journo request on their hashtag to see what people are looking for. In fact, you might be too late. Even if you see a journo request from, say, an hour ago, lots of other people might have answered that, and so you need to be quick, and you need to be on the ball with that. Look out for hashtags that are relevant to your business as well. So, whether you're in something rural, check out something like the rural hashtag, rural business, etc. And join Facebook groups as well that are relevant to your business and connect other people to your world, because you never know. I'm based up in Yorkshire, and I'm a member of several groups up here, and you just never know who's going to be a member of that group. So there might be some journalists or feature writers in amongst those. Check media request section on places like Mumsnet and other online communities, because a lot of journalists post for free on there. And also register your availability with any charities that you're involved with. It was Vic that gave me an example recently, she had a lady who, her business was nothing to do with this charity, but she suffered from a condition and was involved in a charity for it. So we made sure that that lady was registered with this charity as a spokesperson, because if she's used in a story about her health and this health condition, then of course she's going to be able to say what it's like having this condition alongside running her business, and the business will get a mention. So it's again about human interest and about it not just being about the business. And of course, I'm going to mention this, but join Feature Me. I won't go on about it a lot, but Feature Me UK is a group, and we're on Facebook, and we have a page on Facebook, and we also have a mail shot. We were set up 7 years ago. It was myself and a colleague, Sadie Nicholas, who set it up, and it was really just to put ordinary people on the pages of magazines and newspapers. And we now have nearly 11,500 members. And every day we are putting requests on there from not just myself and my Feature Me colleagues, but other journalists who work for The Sun, the Daily Mirror, the Mail on Sunday, the Telegraph, and it's across the board. And you can get involved, and sometimes you are paid, but sometimes it's just a great PR opportunity as well. So if you want to join, please do. In there.
Oh, there you go. Is there anything else you want to mention, Jill, about Feature Me while we're here?
Oh, sure. Sorry, you've gone to the next slide. Yeah, well, that's who we are in the media opportunities. We also offer advice and support for anybody in your position who has a business, who wants to promote themselves and who isn't quite sure. Now, we are journalists, we're not PRs, and we're not going to be your PR, but if you do need some hand-holding, we will offer that service. If you need press releases writing, if you need to be shown which avenues to go down, which publications to approach, then we'll help you with that, but we won't do your PR for you, because this is all about you being brave and doing your own PR. But we're very happy to show you the way to do it, but it is down to you. So, and we're starting to offer some workshops and courses around the country. We have one in Yorkshire in a couple of weeks, in Halifax. We have one in mid-November in London, and then there's another one in Guildford. So it'll be run by either myself or Victoria, or there's another lady involved called Kate Stewart, who's former writer for The Sun and now does some PR. And yeah, we'll be going through lots of ways with your own individual businesses as to how you can get more publicity. So if you want more details of that, check us out on Feature Me.
Okay. So let's talk about process. So, you know, you've had a real planning session, you know what you're aiming for, and you've got your list of things that you've got to get organised. So the first thing I'm going to say is don't jump to conclusions about individual media. You've got, you know, you will have the newspaper that you read. You will have the newspaper that your clients read. These are not necessarily the same thing. You may wish your business only appealed to Guardian readers, but actually it's selling to Sun readers. Really never ever judge the papers through those traditional lenses when you're thinking like this, particularly because some papers are really, really good, are much more women-centric than you might imagine. You know, selling, getting a product placed in the Mirror is a really good place because women read the Mirror. You really need to stretch your mind about this and think to yourself, you know, who's buying what I'm selling, not who do I want to hang out at the pub with. Be certain in your own mind and make a note of necessary two things: what you absolutely do want to say and what you don't want to say. This takes us back to that conversation I was saying about, you know, Brexit. It's really important to be focused about what you want to talk about and not get pulled back into something else. You know, to a certain extent, journalists are going to do this. It's what we do, is we poke around what you're talking about. And unfortunately for you, that may mean that we pull something out that you hadn't planned on telling us. Now, it could be something absolutely harmless. You may end up telling us about your cats. But A, it's distracting when we want to talk about your business. And B, you know, what if your ex-husband had those cats and he's now discovered you've got the cats, and you can cause all kinds of trouble in different ways. You really have to be clear about what you're talking about. It's not frightening. I don't want to put anybody off, but I just want to say, write down that thing that you don't want to talk about. Make sure that that's off the table. And with that in mind, warn your colleagues or relatives who may be affected by you speaking to the press where relevant, because you don't want awkward conversations later. Nobody wants to be the Duchess of York at Balmoral with the Queen the day that all those newspapers came out and she was having her toes sucked on the front page. How easy it would have been if she just said, look, Your Majesty, bit of bad press coming out tomorrow morning, don't come down to breakfast. Life could have been a lot easier. You know, and I'll tell you another good example. So I was interviewing an actor, and he was, I have to say, C-list, pretty much that. I don't think B-list. Very nice man, happy to talk about things, talked at length about his bowels and what was wrong with them, and how he got them going in the morning and things like that. And then towards the end, I just said, can I just confirm your partner, she's a makeup artist? He said, look, I really don't want to talk about anything personal. Okay, so now we know your definition of personal. These are really good questions to have to ask yourself, you know. because you don't want to be poked by a journalist later into talking about something that you later feel, oh, I really wish I hadn't talked about my bowels. So be prepared. You will always be asked your name, your age, your occupation, your hometown, and the same for your partner and children. Yes, you do have to say your age. I'm really sorry about this, but actually you do. It's about context, and it's about authenticity. There is nothing shaming in being 54. I am 54. You've just got to, nobody's Joan Collins. Really, you're not Joan Collins. Just be upfront with who you are and what you do. Do you have to be photographed? Yes, you do. I'm really sorry. Again, some people absolutely hate having their photographs taken. I hate having my photograph taken. Yeah, you have to be photographed. I don't like how I look in this, but here we are. Otherwise, I couldn't tell you about Feature Me. So these are things that just bite the bullet.
I would just add to that about being photographed. If you are uncomfortable with having, say, a press photographer come and do some shots of you, try and get some professional photographs taken that you like, that you can offer up. And get these done, portrait, landscape, headshots, chest and half body shots, full lengths. Get them with your product, get them without your product, get them with things like your cat or your husband or your kids, in your garden, in your office. Get a real range of photographs, because if a newspaper wants to take a picture of you talking about something quite serious, they're not going to want a picture of you smiling with the kids in the garden. It's going to be, you need to have all photographs to suit you. So if you can afford it, try and get a photographer in for maybe half a day and take some really nice professional photographs. Lots of changes of outfits, because if one picture's been in one newspaper, they're not going to want to use the same set of pictures in another paper. So try and change your outfit maybe 2 or 3 times, even if it's just the colour of your top. Try not to wear something that's too dark in colour. Try and make it bright as you dare go. Do your makeup nicely. That's just for the women. And try and get a real nice variety of pictures of you at home, you at work, you walking in the country, you shopping in town, that sort of thing. So you've got something to really illustrate it. But you might still need.
So I'm going to add in there, don't wear jeans. Newspapers really hate it. And you may live in your jeans, but, you're not here to sell denim.
But if you are there to sell denim,
that's different.
Okay, so press pause. If you do get a positive response back from a journalist, well, that is great, and you're on the starting block, so that's lovely. Read it thoroughly. What do they need from you? Because this is a bugbear of mine. I will put a request out, and then I might get a dozen responses from people going, oh, this has happened to me. Yeah, really. Oh, it was awful. Yeah, it was awful. I'll send you my number and I'll send you my details. And I'll, great, get back to them and I'll go, so will you be interviewed? Oh, no, I don't want to be interviewed. Well, why are you telling me then? I'm not your therapist. And I do sometimes think that people just want to tell you that it happened to you, and we'll have a conversation about it. But I need to publish a story. So, if I want to charge, 50 quid an hour as a therapist, then great. I'll happily sit there for an hour and listen to you talk about what happened to you. But I need stories. So if you're going to respond to a journalist, be aware that A, they'll want to interview, B, they'll want to take your photograph, and C, it will get published. So just be aware of that. When a journalist gets back to you and you organise a time for an interview, just try and take 10 or 15 minutes to say, yeah, absolutely happy, just give me a few minutes and I'll call you, or you can call me. And that's the time just to jot down some notes about what you want to say and what you don't want to say. It just gives you that space and that time. Sometimes I will help the case study out myself by just firing off maybe 5 or 6 starter questions, just so they're kind of warmed up and they know what to talk about, because it's very difficult suddenly to sometimes think off the top of your head. If I'm wanting a specific anecdote or if I'm wanting a specific memory, then just to go, so what did happen to you in February of last year when you were doing this event? And they just freeze. So if I tell them that that's what we're going to be talking about, then it just gives you a bit of time to think about it. Most of the time these days, if it's just going to be a short interview, it will be done over the phone or over Skype or FaceTime or something like that. Sadly, journalists don't have the time, and newspapers and magazines don't have the budget to send out certainly print journalist. Obviously, if it's broadcast journalist, they will come to you or you'll go to them. So think about how you would like to be interviewed. You might be very comfortable speaking on the phone rather than FaceTime. I know I am. I much prefer talking on the phone than doing a live interview. But sometimes if it's going to be a long chat, it's always better for the journalist to come to somewhere where you're comfortable. Might not have to be your home. Sometimes people prefer to go to a pub, or they prefer to go to a hotel or somewhere that's just a bit neutral, where they feel perhaps that they're not going to give as much away about their own personal environment. And always don't be afraid to ask about that. But I would add, if you're a business owner and you run your business from home, what a great opportunity to get a journalist in to see what you're running. You know, I set this business up from my kitchen table and now look at me. That kind of thing is great because it all adds to the colour of the feature. If the interview is for a broadcaster, then obviously ask if it's going to be live, because I'd really suggest that you do a practice run. So get a friend or get a colleague or your husband or wife, whatever, to ask you some questions and to film it. We've all got cameras on our phones now, so you can tell what you look like on camera. If you're a hand waver, like I tend to be, you know, put your hands in your pockets or just relax them down on the desk or underneath your thighs, or just get used to your mannerisms. You might, I don't know, you might shrug your shoulders a lot, or you might flick your hair. Try not to do that as much. Look at the camera and just be as natural as possible, be as relaxed as possible. It's terrifying being on camera. I'm nervous now talking to you, but you just got to be as comfortable as possible and relaxed as possible. So that, you know, just have a few practice runs, and maybe do a few practice runs where you're walking, or where you're again in your office, in your home. Get a few different environments, because you don't know where the TV company are going to want to film you. If it's a country business, they might want you walking through a field. If it's a business that might be going to a factory, they might want you in some kind of industrial setting. So just have a bit of a practice run with a friend or a colleague, and be prepared for being misquoted or edited. It doesn't happen often, but you can spend 4 or 5 hours with a TV crew and they will use 10 seconds of film. And you'll think, well, what the... But that's how TV works. That's how radio works. And as far as print journalism goes, you know, I do my damnedest not to misquote people, to the point where I will sometimes email them their quotes and say, is this accurate? Are you happy with this? Because this is what I'm going to weave into the story. And I like to do that. I don't have an ITSO complaint on my file, thank you very much. But sometimes it's not always possible. If it's quick turnaround, we might get a name wrong, we might get a spelling wrong. Try not to go mad. If it's not going to really affect your business, if it's a spelling that's wrong, just say, you know, what happened there? And we can get a correction in or something like that. So
yeah. I think what you're saying is quite interesting, because I can remember interviewing, again, it was a sort of celebrity, and we did this long interview, and I literally had my tape recorder up here by her head for 3 hours, I think it was. It was unbelievable. And at one point in the interview, she said, what's your angle going to be? And I said, my angle is going to be X. I'm going to say X. And she said, that's a great angle. And let me tell you more about X. And so I went home feeling pretty pleased with myself. I went home and I transcribed my tape and I wrote up the interview, and it was all around X. It was exactly what we promised. And she rang my editor the next day to say that I'd told lies about her. The whole thing was rubbish. She'd never agreed to talk about this subject at all, and the X wasn't true. And so I got a sort of furious phone call saying, what's this all about? And I said, well, look, not only did I tape it, and I can show you I tape it, you can listen to it, I actually said to her, I'm going to talk about that. And she said, okay. And all I could think was that at the end of the day, she read it, and perhaps somebody near close to her said, oh, that makes you look a bit stupid. And she was then very upset, and then she felt she hadn't said it. You know, feeling and reality is sometimes quite, they're in conflict.
It's a very good get-out clause, isn't it, Vic, to say to friends, oh, it's the journalist's fault. She got it all wrong. I never said that. So they can say to their friends, no, I never said that. She misquoted me. Now, if that went to court or whatever, we can usually prove that it's been said. And honestly, we get so many people going, I never said that. I never said that.
Yeah.
But 90% of the time, it's on tape.
Yeah. And sometimes you just don't, sometimes you actually don't even realize you've said it. You know, you're talking about something, and you want to talk, you want to be open, you want to be helpful, And things that, and that's where we said earlier on, make sure you don't talk about what you don't want to talk about. Be clear in your mind. That's off limits for me. I'm not going to talk about it, because otherwise, you know, conversations are fun. You're having a good time. You will talk.
You should also be, can I just add to that as well, try not to be too guarded.
Yeah.
If there's nothing in your life that you are particularly worried about talking about, then try and be as open and honest as possible.
Yeah.
Because journalists can tell when you are being guarded or when you're trying to hide something, and that can stymie the flow of the conversation, and the journalist will always be thinking, what is he or she hiding?
Yeah.
So I'm not trying to scare you, but do try and think of an interview with a journalist as a conversation.
Yeah.
Don't be intimidated by that person. They're not trying to catch you out, unless you're a politician who you know is lying. You know, we're not trying to catch you out on something. We're just trying to have a conversation about the story. So just be on it, and it does come across, especially in live, in broadcast. It really comes across if you're trying to hide something. We've seen it all over the news recently, where politicians are, I'm not going to say lying, but they're certainly hiding something, and it just comes across, and people mistrust them. So it's worth bearing in mind. One thing I meant to mention in Press Pause was if you are being photographed or being filmed, it's a great opportunity to get your brand in, whether it's a t-shirt with your brand name on it, whether it's a van behind you with your branding on it, something like that is really good to have in the background. Some broadcasters and photographers can be a bit funny about it, especially if there's writing, because sometimes they need to flip the photograph when it goes into the magazine. So they might say, you know, we can't have that because it's got writing. But it's always worth having a go if you can get something that's branded in the photograph. It's a great way to get some PR.
Going on to Ready, Steady, Go. So, as we've just said, be friendly, be open, expect a positive experience. You are a professional sharing an interesting story with another professional. That's got to be your starting point. If you say something you want to withdraw and you regret it, say it clearly, I'm sorry, I would ask you not to print that part, or that needs to be off the record. You need to be, because again, we're not talking about politicians here. You are somebody who's talking about your business. So you're not trying to hide the fact that you've got a slush fund that you've just owned up to. You know, maybe you've just revealed that next year's design by mistake. You know, these things happen. As long as you're clear and you're frank and you're honest and you're having a good experience, the two of you should be able to work together in that sense. If you feel you're getting drawn into a line of questioning that you're uncomfortable with, take a breath and halt. It's really easy in an interview situation to just ramble. Try and build in some breaths, even if you have to put a note on your computer while you're on the phone saying, don't forget to breathe. Don't be an armchair expert. Don't get drawn into offering expertise or opinions in areas where you are not 100% sure of yourself and where conversations could land you in unexpected hot water. And be gracious. Never undermine your competitors or complain about anyone. Don't gossip. Have a short mission statement or sentence prepared which sums up what you want to promote. At the end of the interview, ask the journalist if you have made that point and if it's clear.
And once you've done the story and this photographs have all been done, you know, you've had your quotes approved, the journalist's been back for marks and it's written up, that's when the fun begins, because it's worth noting that editors, it's always up to the editor when that story appears. Sometimes it might appear the very next day or an hour later in broadcast or whatever, but they decide how it appears. So you might be expecting a double page spread in a newspaper and it might end up as a 2-column story with no picture. And they'll decide which pictures get used, which headlines get used. And if you don't like that finished result, then you can't assume it's the fault of the journalist, especially if you've dealt with a freelance journalist. You know, I'm 200 miles away from most of the people I write for. I'm not even involved in the laying out process. I've worked on the Daily Mail and the Daily Mirror, and I've seen how it's done, and I know how quickly it's done. The journalist, the reporter, has very, very little say into how the final story looks. So you'll never have control over a headline. I mean, I know celebrities, you know, A-list celebrities who demanded headline approval, and I don't know anyone who's got it. Things like picture captions, that sort of thing, which pictures are used, that's all up to the editor. And sadly, they'll decide when it gets used. So sometimes that can be months later. And I know personally, I have 2 or 3 stories that I wrote back in February, March time that are still waiting to go in. And that's the worst part of my job. I've tweeted about this before and said, absolutely the most frustrating part of my job is doing an interview, doing great features, great, what I think is a great story, filing it, and then it just not going anywhere. And thinking, what? And if some time then passes, then you're waiting for another hook to come along. So if it's about a particular kind of weight loss, for instance, then you're waiting for perhaps a celebrity to also have that weight loss so they can bring in this feature. We just had this feature waiting in our files, and it looks great for the page because it looks like we turned this round in a day, when actually they could have been sitting on it for 6 months. So just be aware that it might take months to go in, and you know what, it might never go in as well. There's something called the spike, which I'm sure you've heard of, and sometimes they get spiked, and again, that's really frustrating. But if you have a really serious complaint, like you've been lied to, or you've been severely misquoted, it's going to affect your business or your family, and you can prove that you've not said these things, then you've got other steps that you can go to. You can go to IPSO, who's the media ombudsman, and they can decide whether some wrongdoing has been done, and you can get you can go down the legal route, but that's a long way down the line. But you can get clarifications, you can get corrections. So
so the aftermath, you've been in the paper, hooray, you've been in your target media. So the follow-up comes along. And the first bit of the follow-up that we want to talk about is social media. Make sure you tweet a link to the article where you appear, or if it's a radio or TV show, the segment. Thank the media outlet or the journalist involved via their Twitter handle. Don't forget to retweet and interact with anyone who likes or shares your post. You can just expand the life of what you've achieved so much by just spending an extra couple of hours over the course of the following week. Schedule a tweet for 2 days later with the hashtag in case you missed it and your link. Repeat another 5 days later with the link saying still celebrating this great coverage. Create an original post for Facebook, link it to the article at the publication, pin it to your page, and it will remain there until you want to share some new news. Don't forget to share to all your Facebook groups, make the post public. God, how often do we all forget to do that? Why not also share the moment with a live video? Because live video is great for all the algorithms. Don't forget dear old LinkedIn, my old favourite. Instagram, Pinterest, they demand good visuals. How about a selfie of you reading the article? Why not add an offer or a discount at the same time to have more traffic?
And don't forget about local media. Local media are desperate for stories. They have dwindling budgets, dwindling numbers of staff, and I truly believe that these are the best port of call for your story in the beginning, because they'll be desperate. You look at any local newspaper and go through it page by page. I bet 70 or 80% of those stories are positive, PR-driven stories about local businesses or local charity events or local people. There's very little hard news apart from court reports, or if there's been a crime or something like that, or something in local government. The rest of it is all really good coverage for local businesses and local individuals. So it's definitely worth getting on board with a local newspaper. You might want to, if you're an expert in your field, you might want to get hold of, say, the business editor or the business reporter of that particular newspaper and say, look, if you ever want an opinion on what it's like having a local business in this area, then I'm always happy to give my opinion. Or on a national level, if there's something changing, for instance, with HMRC and tax, you're involved with that as a business. So if they're wanting a line from a local business, say, hey, I'm up for talking about this. And that way you really develop a relationship with the reporters at the local papers, and they'll come to you then rather than your competitor.
I think also adding in that, I don't know what the split on this webinar is, but if you're a woman, we are still crying out for women speakers in absolutely every area, particularly business, particularly finance. It gives you an added advantage. Take it.
I'd agree with that. We're always looking for more women to be experts. So women are not as confident talking about these things, and it's such a shame. So
Yeah.
whereas men will talk about it till the cows come home. So if you know, as a small business owner, or you've got a product to sell, you know about finance, you know about tax returns, you'll even know about Brexit and how it's going to affect you, if it's going to affect your business. So if you feel passionately about it, then offer to talk about it.
Do your homework. Check the analytics afterwards. Which social media site is giving you the best engagement? When were the posts and tweets viewed? I mean, I'm always amazed by this stuff, that you go and look at it and you discover that post worked really well at 10 o'clock at night. This is the key thing to do. Is and I think again, we're having to be more expert at things than we ever were. So really look into that and see where your audiences are.
I did a social media course a couple of years ago, and it was all about testing and measuring and reflecting on those results. So it's worth keeping a note of when tweets are successful, when Facebook have worked. Video seems to be the thing going forward, which again, I'm not a fan of, but people are good at it, and it will boost you up the algorithm of places like Facebook. It gets noticed. So even if you're camera shy, as we were saying earlier, there might be someone in your team who loves the camera. And if they're happy to go on camera and talk or do something, it might be a chef in your restaurant who's happy to show how to make this incredible stir fry, or it might be, a lady in your shoe shop who can sing, as she's serving the customer. It's got to be something that people are going to find amusing or engaging or just interesting.
Yeah.
So just think a little bit outside the traditional box about what's gonna work.
Oh, and I'm just using myself as a case history here, because I just want you to know that we don't just talk the talk, we walk the walk too. And this was with my book. I brought this book Boundaries out, and I honestly, I pushed so hard. I didn't wait for the PR department of the publishers. I contacted people at Telegraph. I contacted people at lots of magazines where I didn't know anybody. I just kept sending copies of the book out, talking about it. I rang our local newspaper and did a local newspaper interview. Tweeted like crazy. Did an Instagram, put it on LinkedIn, did endless Facebooks, did ridiculous pictures like this of myself in bookshops. And I checked the media quest too. I did like everybody else. I looked for things where I could talk, where I could give advice about boundaries, but also where I could talk what it was like to be an author. So it's taking that whole view to whatever you're doing.
And doing your own PR can be so much more effective because you feel so much more in control. I'll give you a quick example of good and bad PR from this week. I had to interview a consultant about a specific health problem that I was writing about, and I contacted one PR department of a hospital, and they told me that he was on holiday and couldn't possibly talk. And I thought, okay. I tried a charity and I said, can I speak to a consultant about this problem? Within 10 minutes, I had the consultant on my phone ringing me. Turned out it was the same man. Yeah, he was ringing me as he got on a train to go to the airport. But the hospital PR just thought, oh, he's not going to talk to a journalist while he's on holiday. The charity PR thought, he can only say no. So they rang him and found out. And of course, the charity, not the hospital, are going to get the big plug in the newspaper when this goes to press. So if you're doing your own PR, what's been done. You've contacted that journalist. They might say no, but if you're giving it over to somebody else, can you trust that person is always going to be on top of it? And that's a good example of knowing why to do your own stuff sometimes.
Yeah. So I think we've come to questions. So Hannah.
Yes, hello. Thank you. That was brilliant. It's interesting to hear you just talk around the actual thing as well, about the actual kind of facts about your experience as journalists. You are the people that many of us are trying to reach.
Yeah, of course.
Personally, you think and feel. I think it's really helpful to say to everyone, if you want to ask a question, we've got about 15 minutes of questions if you have to ask them. Kerry says, absolutely invaluable information. Thank you both so much.
Oh, lovely.
You're welcome.
Do put any questions into the chat box and we will answer them. I have to say, I just talking about Feature Me. So I was a member of Miss Dashwood's Register, which is like kind of a same kind of thing, and it was so invaluable. I joined actually after you did a webinar for me, Victoria, and I got so much coverage from that. I got in the Daily Mail, I got in This Is the Money, which is the Mail on Sunday, Money.
Yeah.
I got lots and lots of coverage from it, and it was such a wise investment for my business, because at that time I couldn't afford to hire a PR agency myself. I do now have a PR agency. At that time I didn't, but I had emails coming in my inbox with these requests coming to me, and I could just choose the ones I wanted to reply to.
Yeah.
I got in a lot. So honestly, if you can't afford a PR agency and you don't have the time to check Twitter constantly for the journal requests, I highly recommend doing something like this. It's a great middle ground, it's affordable for businesses, and the return on investment you can get is amazing. I mean, a piece of coverage in Daily Mail is just worth, I mean, think what you like politically about the paper.
Yeah.
In terms of coverage, it's worth a lot of money.
Yeah.
Lorraine asks, brilliant, thank you very much. Really want to do the workshop. What's the date in London?
London is November the 14th.
Okay, brilliant. Do you want, I'm going to send a recording out to everyone, so I'll put any links. So Victoria and Jill, if you can email me any links afterwards or anything, make sure they go in the email as well. So if anyone wants to book up workshops or look at, what you're doing, they can get
Brilliant.
I also will say I am one of the 5% that was misquoted.
Oh, really?
Yes, I did many, many years ago. Cosmo did an interview with me and about my then husband, and the journalist sent me. Nowadays, I noticed that journalists will always send you back or read to you what you have said for your presentation. In these days, this wasn't the norm, and the journalist was really lovely, and she sent me a copy of what she was submitting to a sub-editor, and it was perfect. But she wasn't actually allowed to send it to me, but she just wanted me to be reassured that she was, because it was quite a personal story. Anyway, what appeared in the magazine bore no resemblance to. They talked about me having sex with my husband, which I had never mentioned. And I was aghast, so I complained. It was Lorraine Candy was the editor, and I complained. And I had a really patronising email back saying, a bit like now, that people get all funny when they're interviewed by the press and their mouth goes away, it runs away with them.
Yeah.
I didn't want to get the journalist in trouble, so I couldn't divulge what she'd sent me. I couldn't send her the proof.
Yeah.
I did complain to the Press Complaints Commission, but it wasn't upheld because I had no proof. But it does happen. I think.
Can I ask Hannah, how long ago was that, please? Because regulations are so much tighter now. And I know certainly 20 years ago, I know someone who was upset about being misquoted in the same magazine, but I don't know if they get away with that now.
No, this was in 2002, I think.
Yeah, so quite a long time ago before the regulation. I mean, we literally, we jump through hoops nowadays to make sure people are not misquoted, because we do not want to be wrapped on the knuckles by it, particularly as freelancers. With the with the invention of social media, you only need one person to say, oh, don't deal with Jill Foster, she totally misquoted me, that's my reputation in tatters. I can't afford to do that as a freelance. I really can't. And I think a lot of freelancers will tell you the same thing. Staff writers might not care as much, but they don't want to be wrapped over the knuckles either, because otherwise clarifications or a mistakes, a correction will come into the paper and they'll be name checked on that. So again, they get reputation.
Like you said, it was a long, long time ago now.
Yeah.
And I have noticed that in dealing with the media now, it's very, very different. They're very careful to make sure that you're happy with what they're going to write.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was a long time ago, but you just talking about that reminded me. And
yeah, I'm sorry.
It's not you. It wasn't you personally.
I know.
I mean, my mum was misquoted by Cosmopolitan in about 1999, so really? I know where you're coming from.
It's a rather large club, then, it seems. The journalist, when I didn't get in touch with the initial journalist, and she said that they had a sub-editor at the time that was a big Mills and Boon reader that loved to turn every story into this romantic love story. We have got some questions that I don't want to take up all the time, so we've got a couple on Q&A. I've got one in chat. So Lorraine asks, if you want to get a product featured in the Mail Online, is this a paid endorsement, or are you featured in the paper, or if you're featured in the paper, does it automatically go online? Okay, so she's asking, if you're featured in the printed paper, is it automatically go online, and is it a paid feature, or is it just editorial?
If it's if it's editorial in the newspaper, 95% of the time it goes online. Very, very few times does it not go online unless there's some kind of legal reason why it can't go online. It doesn't work the other way around. Mail Online has thousands of stories every day, and not all of them are covered in the newspaper. But if you have a story in the newspaper, then, but if you're paying for an advert, then an advert in the Daily Mail is thousands and thousands of pounds. So yes, I don't know what the advertising relationship is between Mail Online and the newspaper or Mail on Sunday, but yeah, you're better off getting editorial because that will be picked up by both, and it's free.
Yeah, I'll add to that actually. Quite interestingly, I wrote a piece for an online outlet about weight loss, and they wanted some photographs for me. And the Mail Online wanted to pick the story up and run it as well. Now, I didn't want that story on Mail Online. I didn't want my fat body to go to all of Mail Online readers. And the Mail were very much like, well, we can take this. We don't have to worry. But what they couldn't do was have extra photographs. So I just, I withdrew the photographs that I'd already supplied. And then I just said, no, sorry, I've got nothing else to offer you. And without photographs, it was useless. So think about what you've got. If you've got something you don't want to go online, there are ways to stop it, and you have to be, the old thing about, if you didn't want to be on broadcast, you just swear because they can't use swear words. So, if you just let out a string of expletives, you're not going to be on TV. It's fine. And the same.
I have sworn on live TV. And in fact, it was on the Victoria Derbyshire show, and she asked me to swear.
Did she?
She, because obviously the researchers knew my story, and it was that there's a particular quote that someone had said to me.
Yeah.
And she asked me what happened, and I said, but I changed the quote, and she said, well, that's not what they said to you, is it? So I had to swear on Victoria Derbyshire live on TV.
That's a different reason, isn't it?
Claim to fame.
Yeah. And some more questions?
I just want to say, yes, there are. I just want to say one thing about, I know we all love to appear on the pages of magazines.
Yeah.
But there is an advantage to appearing. There's two advantages to appearing online. If you are online and if you can get a link, and papers like the Daily Mail don't usually give links, but if you can get a link, first of all, someone can directly find your site, and especially if you've got a product. In this question, if your product appears online, you can ask for a link, and you can get direct sales from that. Also helps for SEO as well. If you've got a link from a large paper, will have great rank, domain authority and page authority, and a link from them is worth quite a lot. So although we all love to appear in the pages of a magazine, actually there's more longevity and better SEO value from appearing online.
Yeah, it's true.
Terry's got a quick and easy question. What's the best thing to write in the subject bar of an email to be seen? So I guess if, like, for, either you, Victoria, or Jill, if you're receiving an email from a company, what should they write to get you to notice it?
The one that always grabs me, because I'm such, I'm always writing human interest things, is case study available. That will grab me straight away. Case study available, and then I'll open the email, which a lot of the time I don't even open them because it's just, I know it's going to be not relevant to me. But case study available, or another one that always grabs me is your story on page X, because
that's true.
The alarm bell in my head first of all goes, it's a complaint. So I always open it. 9 times out of 10 it's not, but it might just be your story today on page X, and then go into it, say something like, oh, hi Jill, I saw your story today on shoes. I know you probably won't be following up on this, but if you are, we run this business, the shoe business, and we have X, Y, and Z to talk about if you ever want to follow it up again. What I can't stand is people honestly coming back to me and saying, we know you covered the story about shoes today. Can you include our business in it now, retrospectively, like I'm just going to call 2 million copies of the paper back and say, can you just mulch those up and we'll start again? I mean, it's just so naive, and I get that all the time. I know a lot of colleagues do.
Yeah, we do.
And all they ask for something to be added to the online section. Well, no, sorry, you should be on top of your PR.
Yeah.
When I was writing it yesterday or the day before, don't ever say that, because it comes across as really naive.
Yeah.
And I'm really sorry you weren't included. But if you come back and say things like, I know we missed out this time, but hey, we've got a great product. We've got all this news about our product, and also we've got interesting people to talk to, then next time you do it, whether it's in 3 months or 6 months, do keep in touch, and then follow me on Twitter or follow my website and find out when I'm asking about this subject again. And because I'll remember you, I'll come back to you for the next time.
So you're using it as a chance to start a relationship.
Absolutely, rather than annoy me by saying, "Can you add it?"
Yeah,
into the stuff
exactly.
you've already written. I can't be the only one, Vic. You must have had that.
I have it all the time, and I think it's particularly frustrating with things like, I've written a story about breast cancer, and someone immediately say, "I know you like to write breast cancer. Would you like to write my story about breast cancer?" Well, actually, no, that you've just read a story. Newspapers do not work like that. They do not run a story about breast cancer today and then one tomorrow. It's just, you wouldn't want to read it. You wouldn't want to read a newspaper that was full of the same stuff day in, day in, day out. So we don't. That's why we don't bridge it.
I think one of the things here is to think about, and I always say to people is, don't think about what you want, think about what the person you're talking to wants. So when you or any journalist, think about, or a newspaper, what's the aim of that newspaper, the aim of that journalist? If I can solve your problem and mine at the same time, rather than thinking, well, I just want my product in your paper, so can you put it in?
You've hit the nail on the head, Hannah. I know a very good PR who I was in a working relationship with a few years ago would follow me on Twitter, even if she couldn't help me with any of her own clients. If she knew someone, even a friend or a family member who might be able to help me with that certain feature, she'd be texting me at 9 p.m. at night, going, "Just seeing your tweet. None of my clients can help, but try this guy or try that guy." And I loved her for that. And of course, she was a PR for a clinic at the time. Every time I needed a quote for a surgeon or a clinic, she was the first person I called because she was so good to me in helping me out with my features. And I managed to get loads of quotes from her surgeons in newspapers and magazines after that. So it is about building up that trust and that relationship.
Absolutely. Right, I'm going to go on 5 minutes because we've got 2 more. Honestly, I could talk all day to information. So we've got 2 questions here. So Sue's is a really good one, but it's quite complex. So Sue has a PAH service called Consider It Done. She helps high-achieving women running the home as well as successful demanding careers. Now, Sue has tried all kinds of things to get PR attention. She doesn't have a product to send out, and she can't talk about the real specifics of what she does because they need a client privacy. She said that she's offered journalists a chance to be a client for a period of time, but this has been done lots of times, but it isn't new. Plus, I have given free time to the journalists without getting the gig. Once with the Mail, had photos done, etc., etc. The Mail is famous for that. You get as far as the photos and it never goes. Do the panel have any fresh ideas or angles I can try?
There could be a diary of where you could do an anonymous, you wouldn't have to identify any of your clients, but you could say what you've been doing for them, so nobody would be annoyed that you've told them what your jobs are. And you could even hide it somehow. You don't have to be completely accurate when you're doing an anonymized diary. You could always, say you're taking the children to school or something. You could say I drove the kids to college or whatever, just fudging it a little bit so they're not immediately identified. You could give top tips for timekeeping for busy women. It's never ever going to make a huge feature because people, we always like people identified. I mean, my first instinct when you told me that was like, oh, could you speak to any of your clients to see if they can talk about, but if they all want to be anonymous, then I can see your problem. But there are always columns and little, in work sections and business sections of newspapers where people want experts to talk about the top 10 time-saving hacks. And and it's again about developing the relationship with the editor or the reporters of that page to say, if you need something like this, then I'm here. And if you have a blog, great, get that all over social media with these really useful hints and tips. As stats are always good for this kind of thing. When I said earlier in the talk about you don't have to have that strong data. You can just say, 99% of my clients think this or do this. And that might set about a journalist thinking about, oh, this must be a trend amongst working women.
Well, I've got a couple of things as well that just springs to mind. So firstly, absolutely the expert. You had to be proactive about that. And don't be afraid. We all kind of want like the Mail, the Guardian, the Times, Women and Home magazine. Don't be afraid to go for, online. Again, less but online, and establish yourself as an expert around things like balancing things, time management. But particularly one thing, if you do want to get kind of more high profile stuff, is reactive things. So whatever things in the news. So let's say a really high profile woman gets divorced, high profile career woman. You could maybe approach papers and say, 6 things that, I don't know, let's say it's Stella McCartney. Stella McCartney could have done differently that could have saved her marriage.
Yeah.
They're going to want something that's going to be it's going to give us attention, it's going to be relevant. And if you've got an opinion on something, that's when you can potentially ride that news story and then get some thing yourself. Because once something, you, Victoria and Jill, you know this better than I do, but once a news story is out there, everyone's looking for different angles on the same story.
Absolutely.
High at that moment, and everyone's googling this person, and you want your publication to be up there, and if you've got a really unique angle, then they're going to be lapping it up if you could provide them something. And I do know women who aren't PR experts, and I've got a friend called Sally that does really well with her business. She was straight on this. She read the news every day, and she'd think about an angle, and she would contact them. And she got in the Independent, I think the Telegraph. She got on TV just by contacting that newspaper magazine and going, "I've got an angle on this." Get her in. So those were my 2 things that immediately spring to mind.
I'd throw in a seasonal one as well. A business like yours, I think really you ought to be able to tell people how to manage Christmas, how to manage the holidays, how to manage your home over summer, what to do in your home if you're going away, keeping it safe. There's so many angles around it, actually. Now we're all thinking. I think in many ways it's quite exciting, because you could also do something about people doing untraditional jobs. Perhaps you've got people who work for you. You've got a guy who's the manny, or a woman who's a handyman. So you don't necessarily have to interview your clients, but you can interview people who do jobs for you.
Yeah, you'll know things like, who are the best people to decorate your Christmas tree if you're busy.
Absolutely.
Which, believe me, a newspaper would be all over that, or an online platform would, because then they would then probably get that person in to decorate 10 different Christmas trees, but you'd get a mention.
Yeah. And you could even brand yourself like something like Mother Christmas.
Yeah.
And actually be the go-to person every Christmas. You're there as many publications as possible with your Christmas tips.
Yeah.
In fact, I've just thought of a really good one which would work. That's how it works, isn't it?
Yeah.
I always say to people, don't think, if you're working in a field where you have competitors, where you have people that you might work alongside or collaborate with sometimes, talk to them about collaborating on a feature, because if you're not in direct competition, I was speaking to a lady at a PR thing the other day who was a nail technician, and she was starting something that was going to be doing nails for women who'd been out of work for a long time, to kind of give them confidence. And I said, well, that's a lovely local story, but if you're wanting to make the national press, I think what you'd have to do is collaborate with perhaps a hairdresser, perhaps a fashion stylist, and someone else. Come together with all your stories and sell it as, the women who change other women's lives through beauty or through fashion, or the women who give each other others confidence through these things. And it's not just about you, but it's about your brand and your industry, if you like. But it means that competitors, yes, of course, they will get some publicity as well, but that means that they'll repay the favour next time when something comes along that they can help you with.
Yeah.
So think a little bit more broadly about the subject.
Sue, I hope you find that helpful. There's lots of ideas there. What an amazing opportunity to pick the brains of journalists and get.
Well, come to the workshops and you can do that for hours.
Oh my God, if that's something at the workshops, amazing. I've got 2, so Beverly and Karen, I've got 2 last questions. We're so over time.
I know.
So Beverly asks, can you explain further about exclusivity and story shelf life? So I would say, what's the shelf life of a story? I think probably that's her question.
That's how long is a piece of string. It really is. I've got one from July that was hooked onto, and I've forgotten her name, the Wimbledon champion having a breast reduction to further her career. Apparently she had a breast reduction. So I was asked to find women who'd done that. And it was really good, and I filed it within the week, all good. But then for whatever reason, it could be that there were other stories about Wimbledon or breast reductions or surgery. It didn't make following week and following week. And now I look at that story and think it's completely out of date. But what I will do knows it. I noticed the other day that Shirley Ballas is having her breast implants removed for Strictly Come Dancing. So I thought, well, that's a new hook. And there's never, there's always something coming round that you can hook stories onto. So yes, if you've lost that opportunity, then fine, but another one will be along in a minute or in a month. So don't lose heart about it, but it is disappointing at the time, but there will be another opportunity. And by then you might have some more news or something else to say about it.
Yeah. Exclusivity. Always be sure that you really are exclusive. I am not the only journalist who's had emails saying things like, exclusive story, orange juice contains vitamin C. People think they can put exclusive on a story and that it makes it exclusive. And that's most of the time really not true. It's really, really difficult to have an exclusive story. You can have a sort of, because even if I put a story in the Mail, it's entirely possible somebody else will rip it off somewhere else and put it on a website, and it's, it's no longer exclusive. Things move so fast because of the internet. But if you are going to say to me, I've got a great story, and I think it's worth giving it to you on an exclusive basis, you can time limit it. You can say, if it's not been used by X, Y, or Z, I'm going to pass it on to the next person. But then again, that's going to depend on how long you feel. If it's for an event that's happening in a week's time, obviously you need to get it in fast. But then that's kind of a reason not to do it exclusively anyway, because your exclusive is great if you are 100% sure it's going to happen. If you are not, and you really need it out there, if you need your story out there, don't make it exclusive, because you're putting all your eggs in one basket. I don't know what Jill thinks.
I agree with every word. Yeah, I agree with every word.
Sophie also says, interestingly, that she's seen. Oh, by the way, she knows someone who refused a breast reduction. If you need anyone that's been.
That's the way to do it.
I love it.
She also says
Super. Get in touch.
She's seen a brand retrospectively added to an online product review after responding with, "Hi, great review. Please pick us." That was in Refinery 29. The nerve, she said.
I'm amazed, actually.
I'm amazed.
They must have been. It must have been a very convincing. Because sometimes, because I like to get in the press myself, but I also have people contact me all the time trying to get in TLC.
Yeah.
You'd be really surprised. A friendly, cheeky email gets you a long way. I want something sometimes for people just because I really like their email and they've asked me, and it's cut through everything else.
Yeah.
Sometimes you could just get lucky. You can catch someone on a good moment, and maybe they've just been given a pay rise, and at the right time. So you just never know.
No.
Karen asked, good question. This one: do journalists prefer people with big social media followings?
I personally don't care.
I'm
not fussed. If a story is a story is a story. Give me a good story. I don't care if you're not on social media at all.
Me too. I don't care. Unless you're telling me you've got a big social media following and it's part of your story, but then I look and you've got 800 followers or something, then yeah. But no, I never bother with that.
Brilliant. Thank you. So fantastic. By the way, lots of people saying, really, thank you very much. Really in depth. It's been really, really helpful. As it's amazing value. Listening to you two, and so much insight. It really is. It's like I say, it's so interesting not to just get the bare bones fact, actually the person.
Yeah, well, that's really good to hear. I've just put the slide up now that has more information because that's our link to join the MailChimp to get the emails.
That's good. We'd be better off doing a Bitly. That's not very catchy.
No, it's rubbish, isn't it? I'm sorry about that, everybody. Yeah. Why don't you go to feature me on Facebook, and it's all on there anyway.
Yeah, and we'll be posting more about the events and everything there as well.
Yeah, and do come and join us, on the workshops, because we actually love to do this in person too.
I will put a link into the recording when I send it out. But yeah, do go, and obviously they can link through to you on Twitter and Facebook there as well.
Yeah.
But it's like I said, this is such an important thing to do. Like, PR has massively helped us. I remember when we first started, we got in the Sunday Times less than a year after starting TLC, and that coverage helped our brand enormously because people thought it was really big. And you know, and I'd always done my PR myself, but joining something like Miss Ashford's Register, which is now Feature Me, was enormously helpful because I didn't have to make that effort with PR. It came to me, and I could pick the things that, you know, that worked for me. So it's such a good investment. I highly recommend getting involved personally.
Brilliant. Thank you very much for having us.
Thank you.
So that's been amazing. I will. So if you can send me any links that you want me to include in the email afterwards.
Great.
And thank you everyone for joining us.
Yes, thanks everyone.
Thank you.
You will be able to watch again if you want to.
Excellent.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.